Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show, and welcome to another horror comic omnibus review. This time I have for you the one and only Swamp Thing, the Bronze Age edition. This is a soft cover, unfortunately. Covers issues 1 through 13, but it also includes the original House of Secrets, number 92, with this classic cover, and I got to show it to you because somewhere in my collection it does exist. It's an absolutely stunning cover. Just perfect, even though it's a little misleading, and I'll get into that. And it's actually the origin story of the Swamp Thing, and then it's later retold in Swamp Thing number 1. There's no price tag on that. That's weird. 20 cents for an original number 1 Swamp Thing. Man, how things have changed. And Swamp Thing has been through quite a bit over the years, including I believe a couple of movies. I'm only familiar with one, I think the original. But as a youngster, this is another one of those things that my parents deemed maybe a little too scary, even though in kindergarten I read The Telltale Heart because of my father's urgings. Oh, you can read now, huh? Here, try this. What a weird thing to give a kindergartner, right? But it was written, at least the first, I want to say, 10 issues by the legendary Len Wein, and of course illustrated by Bernie Wrightson, later taken over by other folks on both ends, which was unfortunate, but both of them were in high demand, so they got pulled to other things, or things happen. But it starts out with Alec and Linda Holland being more or less given a nice chateau house out in the Louisiana bayou to perfect their experiments on plant growth and making the world a better place and things like that by a sort of a mysterious benefactor company that ultimately are the number one bad guys. There's many bad guys that they will encounter throughout, or at least Alec, aka the Swamp Thing, will encounter in his career. Unfortunately, they want to steal his breakthrough formula and keep it all to themselves, and plan to eliminate the two of them with a really cheesy 1970s a couple of sticks of dynamite time bomb that Alec just so happens to discover in almost the nick of time. A little later, and he would have just been blown up, but instead he gets blown up, and kind of like the Flash, splashed with his own formula that transforms him into, you guessed it, the Swamp Thing. The story's actually kind of tragic because his wife is killed in the course of events, and Swamp Thing spends the next at least 13 issues, more or less, trying to get revenge, chasing his perceived enemies all over the planet, which is weird because he has to hitch rides in rather unusual ways that probably wouldn't fly today, trying to hang on and sneak aboard airplanes and things like that. His powers make him incredibly strong, damn near invulnerable. Unfortunately, he cannot speak, or at least he doesn't, because it's too difficult. And throughout the course of the 13 issues here, at least, he encounters many adversaries, including at one time Batman, which was a nice treat. I wasn't expecting that. As a youngster, I only had a couple of these, and they were far and few in between. And I know I never read the one with Batman until I got this. I think he fights a werewolf at some point, and one of his major enemies in the beginning is Anton Arcane, who wishes to, I believe he actually manages to transform Swamp Thing back into a human, but he plans on using the newfound powers of the Swamp Thing to sort of make himself a swampy kind of immortal lich kind of character. And Alec foils that and reverts back to the Swamp Thing. But as much of a horror comic as this was touted as being, even with the Unman and the werewolf and all the other things that go on, it's really more of a tragedy, so much to the point that both the first issue of House of Secrets ends with, if tears could come, they would, and issue 13 also ends the very same way, with Swamp Thing, having gotten his revenge and goes back to his swamp. The only thing that, seems to care about him, which, the swamp doesn't really care, but, it's the only thing he can call home. And once again, of course, it also ends, and if tears could come, they would. So all in all, it's more of a tragedy than a horror comic book. And it's really not that scary. Reading it now, I'm like, not one moment was I really thoroughly scared. But it still goes down in the record books as one of the early horror comic books, because I guess the horror of being transformed into this monster and that sort of thing. And the 70s were a much simpler time. I believe this is right after the comic code loosened its reins on the industry, and things like this were then, welcomed back into the fold, as were comic books like House of Secrets and House of Mystery, and DC had quite a good run with all of those kind of comic books. But that's what I have for you this morning. I always wanted to be able to get this. I got it. It was only, I think I paid $12 for this. It wasn't brand new kind of thing. But if you were ever a fan of this, or would like to have, the Shambling Mound in D&D was clearly a Swamp Thing, even though it was only 4 hit dice. That was still pretty impressive back then. But it's definitely something I'm glad I have in my collection. If you ever read this, or were a fan, or had any questions about it, feel free to put them in the comments section below. I'll have some more stuff for you later on in the week. I'll have my vampire recap on Wednesday, where I'll tell you what's been happening in Bram Stoker's Dracula and the Tomb of Dracula comic book omnibus, and then later on I will get to Vampirella's omnibus volume number 2. But I still have some other horror things I'm going to share with you, including some actual game stuff. So don't worry, there will be more of what you usually come and stop by for. But that's what I got for Monday. Hope you guys have a great week. I will see you guys all in the funny papers, and have a great week.